Well, hello and welcome to the Best Fleets to Drive For podcast. I'm Mark Morrell, co-creator of the Best Fleets to Drive For program, and I'm joined today by a company that surprised me in this latest edition of the Best Fleets to Drive For, Decker Truck Line. Ken Cromwell is here today to tell us all about the things that they're doing. And I think you will see at the end of this why they were a surprising organization, and certainly we'll see why it is that they were able to get onto the top 20 so early in their experiences with the Best Fleets program. So welcome, Ken, to the podcast.
Thanks for having me, Mark.
Okay, so first off, let's talk a little bit about your organization, who you are, what kind of things you do, and where you operate. So tell us about, give us the basics of Decker Truck Line.
Sure. So we are based in Fort Dodge, Iowa. We're a little bit of an oddball in the sense that we are about a third of our fleet is trailing equipment is flatbed, and the other 2/3 is temperature control. So I tell people all the time that we're a couple of different types of trucking companies bolted together. It really does fit our model, being centrally located here in the Midwest, where we're right in the middle of a lot of fresh meat, protein, ice cream on the temperature side, and we happen to be sitting on top of one of the world's largest and most pristine deposits of natural gypsum. So there's a lot of building materials in the area. So we do that on the flatbed side. So that we're comprised of roughly 700 power units, about 1,400-ish pieces of trailing equipment. Again, based in Fort Dodge, but we have a Missoula, Montana terminal and a Bessemer, Alabama terminal. And then we have some logistics offices as well that don't really deal with the asset side in Tennessee and in Des Moines. So we've got a pretty decent footprint for a mid-sized regional carrier. That's 91 years, started in 1931, family owned. We're really proud of our history and how we call it the Decker family, not just our ownership, but also just everyone who's here, and most importantly, our drivers.
90 years old and still family owned?
Correct.
Wow. How many generations is that?
Oh, wow. Well, if I guess 4. Yeah, so it'd be 4. Yeah, so 1931. Our colors are red and yellow, which a lot of people think might have something to do with Iowa State. It doesn't. It's actually the Marine Corps colors. One of our owners served in the Marines in World War II. So that's the color combo we went with in the mid 40s. So yeah, it's definitely gone from generation to generation and should continue to do so.
Wow, excellent. So I said at the beginning that you stood out, you surprised me as we were going through the evaluation process. We collected all of the interview information, all of your driver surveys, and then we start scoring it all. And the way we score this program, we have multiple people that are involved in it, and each person kind of does one question at a time, and they will do all of the responses to one question. So we don't have one person who is evaluating, who's scoring your fleet, and somebody else who's scoring a different fleet. We'll be scoring all of the answers to the second question in the third section or something like that. But what happens, the benefit of that is that you get immersed in that one particular question and you just look at all of the responses and you kind of score it that way. So it ends up being much more objective, and we found it to be a very effective way of scoring the participating fleets. But one of the things that happens occasionally is you get to that point where you've gone through a dozen or so questions that you've scored, and you start noticing that somebody is getting really good scores and is not somebody that you're familiar with. So when I'm going through and I'm scoring it, I go through, and this time there was like 90 answers for every question. So you go through this process and you figure out the score, and then you kind of put it away. But there's some people that you've seen before, the people that ended up in the Hall of Fame. We know what they're doing. It's not that surprising when they get good scores. But then when there's somebody new comes in and they get a really good score on that question, it's like, oh, good for them. And then when they've done that on 4 questions in a row, it's like, this is interesting. where do these guys come from? We're not used to seeing that, because normally people that come into the program, it takes a year or two, sometimes 3 or 4 years, for them to kind of get everything together, to be able to tell their story and to understand who they are enough to be able to communicate that through the evaluation and make it onto the top 20. But you guys were in it for the first time this year, and that really is surprising. It is very uncommon to jump onto the top 20 list your first time in the program. So tell me a little bit about how you ended up in the program, what your experiences were like, sort of why you decided to participate, what was your side of all of that?
Well, my involvement in the program was a little bit later to the table, simply because once we had been nominated and the process started, that's kind of when I got pulled in. Now we were blown away to be nominated. We were interested in the entire process, and the process is quite involved, I would say. Without the help of Cameo Tool and select other leadership group leaders, we would never have been able to navigate it. It's so complex. So it's a little bit daunting. It was overwhelming. But I think really the biggest takeaway was we've kind of, back to our long-time ownership, and we've been doing things a certain way that we've never really been forced to kind of show our math, for lack of a better term. We've always just said, well, that's the way we do it at Decker. So it forced our hand to kind of open up. And one of the major takeaways for me was we had to divide it by department. It was so, HR, safety, obviously operations, which I'm over, finance. We had to really divide the work, and it was really indirectly, it was a really great team building exercise. Which going into it, I don't think any of us in the executive team thought that would be the byproduct of it. We were really just more interested in showing kind of who we are. I like to say we're kind of one of the best kept secrets in trucking, even though we've been around for 90 plus years. But no, so back to your question, really the major takeaway was twofold. Just super appreciative of the acknowledgement of our drivers to nominate us, and then the second part, which was the hard work of showing our math, for back to that term of really how do we do what we say we do. And then I guess also the third part is the feedback. Once we received the surveys back, that was really powerful to see. You might think you're doing it well, but when you start to see the feedback, that's when you start to know it. So
yeah, I love that analogy of having to show your math. I'm going to borrow that and use it again, because that is a great explanation of what it is that we're really trying to do with all of those questions that do get to be fairly precise. And it is, show us exactly what you're doing. And everybody talks about the things that they're committed to, or we believe this, or we believe that. What does it actually look like? So that concept of showing your math is a perfect way of describing it. So that's really a great way. Yeah, I love the analogy. I'm going to be borrowing it for sure. So and there are definitely things that you are doing that I thought were kind of uncommon, and I think it would be good for people to hear it, because there's things that sometimes with these things, it just doesn't occur to people. And as soon as you say it, it's like, oh yeah, that's a good idea, we can do that. But then there's others that are like, oh, I don't know how we would ever manage that, but you're making it work. And the one of the things that stood out to me, and I don't even really talk about this that often on these podcasts, is the whole benefit side of things, because usually fleets have got pretty standardized benefits. They've got health insurance, they may have a 401k, they've got some basic vacation, but you guys really went above and beyond in that. And so the one that stuck out for me is the fact that you auto enroll people in your 401k. And that's, I think, a smart way of doing it, because a lot of times people don't understand why they should be doing it, and they opt out for all the wrong reasons. But your philosophy is just put them in there anyway and start contributing. So is that something that you do for both drivers and office staff? Is that how it works for everybody at the company?
It is. It's across the board. It's something that we just we put in place, I would say maybe a year or two ago. I can't remember the exact timeline. And it was something that we learned about from, we use a third party group that helps aggregate some of our data, and we found out that that's something that was being overlooked, I guess, for lack of a better term. And we realized that that's something that we've got the right financial partners in our providers, that we felt like we should. I don't like to use the word push, but it's something we want to put in the forefront, and it's been overwhelmingly well received. And I believe that in any role in industry, the finance part is something that I think we all could use with a little bit more education. I know I could. My investment guys always trying to tell me, the power of this and the power of that, and I think we all can be better investors. And I think it's another testament for Decker to show that we're really reinvesting in our workforce. And surprisingly, the enrollment and the feedback has been overwhelmingly positive. So yeah, it's been a win. We've also changed a couple of when you get some PTO available. I think those things are some soft wins that a lot of our competitors and most candidly ourselves have benefited from. So and unfortunately in this industry we've been pretty bad about offering a fleet manager or customer service rep or someone in safety vacation right out of the gate, but we didn't do it with our drivers. So we've been really trying to mirror those images where the policies are the same. We're all equal and we're all valued. So yeah, it's definitely been something that we're proud of.
Now that's an interesting point, because everybody talks about how the drivers are so valued and they're so important, but then when you see real discrepancies between the benefits offering for office staff and drivers, and you have somebody who's like, like sort of a junior level, almost a receptionist or somebody, executive assistant type, who ends up with a better benefits package than the driver who's out hauling ass all week, it's really hard to back that up and say that you really do value drivers that much. So I like the fact that you're putting both of those together and saying, well, hang on, we've got to have this, we've got to have a comprehensive program, and it needs to be the same for everybody. We've got to have the same program for drivers that we have for office staff. And you mentioned the time off. That's another thing that really stood out. A lot of times, fleets give very little vacation to their drivers, and sometimes they don't give any. Sometimes they really will just kind of pay a bonus that's the equivalent of a few extra days at the end of a year. But people need that downtime. They need to have a break. They need to do something to have a life outside of the job. And like you say, a customer service rep or fleet manager, safety person, all of those people will be getting some serious vacation, and they're expected to take it and benefit from it and then come back recharged. So why not do that for drivers as well? And I think it's fabulous that you're doing that and that you've made it work. Now, does that cause challenges for you on the operational side when you've got people taking time off and like actually using the vacation?
100%. I mean, it's a good problem, but it is an
Yeah,
opportunity, right?
yeah.
And we want everybody to be safe, healthy, and happy, and you can't do that. I mean, the studies show you have to have time off.
Mhm.
And the days of trucking 51.5 weeks a year are over. The side effects of mental as well as physical health are well documented. So yes, we actually design our fleet to run at a 91. My ops guys and gals will tell you I'm a little harder than that, but we like to be at a 91, 92% operating ratio, or what I'm trying to say is staffing ratio, excuse me. We understand that 8 to 9% of our fleet is not going to be available, and we want that. So yeah, but it does create, especially when we go into times of in Q4 when we're trying to get every load covered. Time off can be a challenge, but it's a good challenge because it's going to make for a happier driver, a more professional, and quite frankly, a better performing driver.
Mhm.
None of us do well on the ragged edge in any aspect of life. So operating 80,000 pounds of equipment and cargo definitely shouldn't be there either. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's a challenge, but we accept it, and I know our drivers appreciate it. And the way I know that is they step in for each other.
Hmm.
When we explain, hey, can you swap this load? This guy needs to get home, or this lady needs to be home. They don't bat an eye, and
Hmm.
that's because somebody's done it for them as well. So
Right.
we're 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 an equal opportunity uh, asker of challenges. So we will ask each other to step up at the time is right, so that the next time you don't have to step up.
Hmm.
So
Now, and kind of related to that, one of the things that really stuck out for me on the operational side is the home time expectation. So we have a question that is, when drivers do get home, how long are they home for? And this comes out of sort of thinking about how there's a lot of fleets that say, oh yeah, drivers are home for their reset every week or every second week. And I'm like, well, that's not a weekend. That's 34 hours. So how long are they actually getting off? And your target is around 3 days, which is very much on the high end. So we see a lot of people that'll have a target of about 48 hours or so, get home Friday night, head back out Sunday night, but you've got a longer period. So I'm guessing it comes from that same sort of philosophy. But even on a weekly basis, you're taking that back to the drivers and saying, we want you to have a good time at home, and we're going to plan around it. So how did that come about? Those extended periods at home.
well, we really, and unfortunately, when you have 700 individuals, that we're not gonna get 3 days for everybody.
No.
um, and that's the juggling act that operations has to maintain, and we accept that challenge. Um, but our goal is to do that. Do we hit it always? Absolutely not. Do we go into it with the expectation that we'll hit it? Yes. So we came to that simply because it's, again, back to the driver feedback. If they're going to run 7 to 8 days, and we can get them home on the routes that we have, and they can we can give them 3 days. We feel like that's an honest, a fair return. Again, not to be a broken record, but it's back to, this is what our office staff somewhat expects, that home life balance needs to be,
Mm-hmm.
while it's never going to be ideologically equal or the same, it does need to have some common, uh, what's the word I'm looking for, but some common denominator of your home life expectation should be the same. Now, I'll also say that we have drivers that want to drive 3 weeks and be off a week or
Sure.
more. We
Mm-hmm.
we, we cater to that,
Mm-hmm.
and that's the puzzle that is operations. But I wouldn't say that we ever just sat down and said we want to make it this way. We've just realized that makes for a happier, more productive driver. And a 36-hour restart is, let's face it, that's kind of a loaded question. I don't know anybody who can get fully recharged for a work week in 36 hours. So
Mm-hmm.
and, yeah, I believe that a good full 72 hours, maybe a little less, is realistic. And we've seen it in our productivity. I mean, we can consistently run, again, at 91% working average, and produce the revenue that we need to produce, and allow that 9 to 10% of drivers to get the hours in that they so deservedly have earned.
So on the front end, it looks like a bigger problem for operations because you've got less people available, in a given week, with that one extra day. But on the back end, the reality is that the people that are there are more productive, they're more diligent, they're more rested. You have fewer other problems to deal with. So you may have a few more challenges in terms of the scheduling, but that is a known issue that you can plan for, and you have less of the surprises that come from people being burned out or exhausted or disgruntled or whatever, right? Yeah.
That's a big part of it. The other constraint is, these trucks and trailers are so over engineered these days, that if we have any downtime in equipment, it really can throw that's where we can see a big wrench, um, into the whole process. Is we've kind of disciplined ourselves to try to make a 5-day work week work.
Hmm.
So any kind of abnormality in the system, be it weather, a mechanical issue, anything like that can really, that's probably where we have our biggest opportunity to be driver first, in the sense of we've got our lanes and our freight volumes figured out. But you can't foresee a snowstorm or a blowout. It's just something we have to manage around. But I would rather cut it close on those items and set the expectation for the driver to be happier up front, because drivers and everybody else in ops and in the industry understands that those things are going to happen. And we do a good job, I think, of making it right. If we hang a guy or a gal out over a weekend or something, this doesn't, the cookie doesn't crumble the right way, so to speak, we do a good job of making up for it on the backside. And that's a testament also to our size. I like that we're not some massive carrier, that we still have, we use truck numbers all the time because that's how we work in ops, but we quickly change from truck number to driver name, because that's that's our customer at the end of the day.
Now, it's interesting, that philosophy we hear a lot from the recruiting side and periodically from the safety side and HR, but ops is often the one that is like, well, we've got to get the freight moving. Our job is to get the freight delivered. So it's sort of uncommon, for that kind of messaging to be coming from an ops person like yourself. But it does speak to the fact that you've got everybody basically saying the same message. You're saying it, recruiting will be saying it, the people doing your onboarding are saying it for drivers. So there isn't this issue of, well, recruiting says one thing, but then you get into the fleet and the fleet manager says something different. Everybody's singing from the same hymn book, so to speak. So that makes a huge difference as well. And that's another place that I noticed where you did very well, particularly for a fleet that size. And one of the questions about how you ensure consistency in communication. And it's easy when you've got 20 people in the office, and the recruiter and the safety and the onboarding and ops are all the same people, or they're sitting side by side or something like that. But in an organization your size, it's that much harder to keep it consistent. So it has to be really a philosophy from the top that is saying this is how we're going to do things, and everybody is going to be on the same page with that kind of messaging. So yeah, but it's something that I found very interesting when I was sort of looking at your notes. Something else that kind of comes around that is your hiring process for drivers. And one of the things that you guys do that I think is a good idea, and some fleets do it, is this idea of an expectation form or an expectation exchange, where both sides say, okay, here's what we need from you. And the drivers can say, this is what I'm looking for. And you can say, okay, well, this is what we need if you're a driver here. And that really helps. It can really increase the quality of the person that you're getting, because you get people that are a better fit and then they tend to stick around. But it also slows down the hiring process. So you're not going to take an application and have that person come into orientation 3 days from now, because you've got to go through that process. It slows things down. So, but it seems that for your part, the organization is really focused on finding a good fit, finding people that are going to be a match for what you're doing. Do you find any issues that come up with that in terms of operations, keeping the trucks filled? You've got trucks parked occasionally, and there's always going to be pressure to get those moving. So how do you balance those things?
So a couple of key metrics that I look at is our assigned truck ratio. So and I don't know if I should say this or not, but I love it when my director of recruiting is somewhat upset sometimes that we can't get the trucks ready in time. That tells me that we are literally using every physical resource we can as quickly as we can. Now, is that an opportunity for us to become more efficient? Absolutely. But it tells me that we are right up against the razor's edge about how quickly are we able to refill those trucks. And luckily, our turnover is in a very desirable state. I'd like it to be better, but we literally want to replace the quality, not the quantity, as quickly as we can. And a lot of times that does slow down the hiring process, to your point. But we've also discovered that um, Fast and Furious, while it might make a good movie, is not a good recruiting mantra. So we definitely want to be methodical in that sense. We did go to twice a week orientation, which we think has been very helpful, because if we're still trying to figure each other out, because what we tell our drivers in every orientation class is, give us a chance to do right by you, and you give us a chance to do right by us. And, we'll meet in the middle. And that sometimes that takes an extra couple of days. So if we can't get you to class on Monday, but we can get you to class on Wednesday, that's a nice alternative to have.
Mhm.
But yeah, we definitely would rather err on the side of caution, um, and we would encourage our prospective driver to do the same. Know that we are not perfect. Yes, we've been doing it for 91 years, but oh my gosh, we learn something every day. So we're gonna screw up, and so are you. We're all human, and let's be completely upfront with our expectations. The expectation sheet or form is what you referred to, is pretty much the first document that everybody goes to look at when we've got an upset new hire. It's like, hey, are we failing him or her, or is he or she failing us? And where can we solve this? So that it does slow down the process, but I think it's a good speed bump.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, I like what you're saying there about replacing the quality rather than replacing the quantity. So that's a good way of looking at it. Um, yeah, and you also have a very interesting driver committee that seems to be working well for you. So tell us a little bit about that, how you have it set up and what you're doing with it.
So our driver advisory council, I can never say it fast three times. The DAC is what we call it. We meet monthly. It's basically an opportunity for, I think it's about 12 to 14 drivers. We try to do it on Fridays, because we typically found that's when they have a little bit of available time. We don't want anybody on the call driving, so everybody needs to be parked or at home. Um, and then we have basically stakeholders from every major department: safety, ops, maintenance, support, the whole gamut. And we basically have identified these 12 to 14 drivers through their performance, their tenure. Not always tenured necessarily. You could be here 6 months and be a great driver, and you might get on the committee. And you could be here 10 years and be a great driver and be on the committee. But you do have to be a pretty darn good driver to be on the committee. So we we found that it's a great channel for communication. Um, I learn something every month when I get off the call. It's a great way, I think, I call it a top to top approach. You've got some of your best drivers talking to your leadership team. Um, they're very candid. The calls usually we definitely fill up the entire hour. Most of the time we go over. I think the drivers get value from it. I certainly do. I know my teammates do as well. So yeah, I don't think it's terribly uncommon, but I do like how it has a very candid and personal feel. Everybody is not they're not there on pomp and circumstance. They'll actually tell you what they think, and that's believe it or not, that's how organizations actually get better. So no, we I I go into those calls with mixed anxiety, because I can't wait to hear the feedback, and I'm a little scared to hear the feedback. So
Hmm.
it's one of those. It's probably one of my most valuable hours a month. Um, and sometimes they feel like those calls can go a little bit longer. They probably should. And then we try to rotate the group. Um, the office group is not necessarily on every call, and then I want to say about every 3 to 6 months we rotate a few folks in and a few folks out, so we keep the conversation lively.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that's interesting about how you're organizing it, that it isn't just the same people all the time. There is a mechanism for people to be part of it, regardless of their tenure with the company. So it's not just the same six drivers that have been there forever that are singing the same song all the time. You've got some new voices, some different perspectives in there. and that's going to give you much more effective feedback and better, better information to work from. So I think that's the part that really makes them successful. Lots of people have driver advisory councils, advisory boards, or they have a committee of some sort. But it's how you keep that committee fresh that really makes it successful. So I think the way you're doing it is not complicated, but it's working. And that's one of the keys to a lot of these things, is find something that's not that complicated, but works for your organization. So yeah, it's a great, great example of a good way of doing it. Something else, that stuck out for me on the whole, we put this in the work-life balance, but it's sort of an operational thing as well. And that is your terminal facilities, things that you offer for drivers, the amenities that you offer for drivers at your terminals, and also the amenities that you offer within the trucks. What we normally see is that fleets will be strong in one or the other. So it might be that they've got a really nice terminal facilities for their drivers, but their trucks are fairly standard, and fairly standard by today's standards. So they've still got APUs, and they've got high quality seats and decent mattresses and all of that stuff, but there isn't really a lot of extra there. It's on the terminal. Or there's times where it's the opposite. Drivers are never in the terminals, so the company doesn't do much there, but the trucks are fabulous. They've got the satellite TV, and they've got Sirius radio, and drivers are put in hotels and things like that. But you are strong on both. You've got really, really nice equipment. You've got a lot of amenities put into those vehicles, but you've also done a lot within the terminals as well. So can you, I'm not even really sure what my question is, other than how do you do that? How do you make all of that work? And what do your drivers think about all of that? It's so uncommon that I can't even phrase a good question out of it. So tell us a little bit about that.
Well, we have a joke here at Decker that anything worth doing is worth overdoing. Our facilities, be it the office that I'm in right now, or a terminal in Montana or Alabama or Indiana, they're pretty top notch, and that's just, for lack of a better term, that's just the Decker way. We just believe that if you do it right the first time, and or at least the second time, we feel like we can stand by that. So the basis of that philosophy is just that simple. We just believe in doing it right. Now, the terminals, while they're great, I would say our pride is in our fleet. We do put a lot of amenities in the trucks, and we hear constantly in a positive way that they appreciate that, because that's their home away from home. We want the driver experience to be just that. I travel quite a bit in my line of work. I like a nice mattress and a warm meal. Just so should everybody else, right? So we want to give that to the driver, because they earn it. And the other side is, I mean, I was really blown away by this. This is the youngest our fleet's ever been. So we even with COVID and the hard times getting trucks, we're at the youngest average age of every unit. And I think that's just another testament back to the terminals of we're going to put our money where our mouth is. We're going to invest up front, do it right. You're going to have newer equipment here. You're going to have nice facilities for you and or your four-legged friend when you come to one of our terminals. It's really, again, just something that kind of came to us naturally to realize, if you listen to what the drivers want and you give them what they want, you don't have to go to Harvard Business School to figure that out. It's literally common sense. Mm-hmm. So we've done a lot of that, but not to the expense, and not to the dishonest, or what the term I'm looking for is, and not at the expense of what it costs. I mean, we realize that to build these facilities is a huge capital expenditure, but we found the drivers appreciate it. So we're looking forward to we have got some festivities coming up for Driver Appreciation Week and things of that nature. So we showcase our facilities. We're really proud of them, just like we are of the equipment.
Okay. And that segs into one of my final questions is your Driver Appreciation Week videos. You have some of the coolest videos I think I've seen from any fleet. So are you doing something this year, and how do you come up with these things?
So you, I got a full disclosure. You're talking to the wrong guy on this stuff. I am always blown away like you are when we do these videos and these concepts. The team that is in charge of this, led by Tammy and some others, is just they're so creative. I'm it's just a blessing to get to work with people who can think of this stuff up, because I'm a rates and numbers guy, and you know I'll bore you to death with deadhead percentages. So the fact that they're able to come up with this and they have this energy and creativity is really just it's like I said, it's a blessing. So yeah, they come up with this stuff. I don't know where they come up with it. They're doing TikTok videos. They're doing all kinds of stuff. Yes, we will have another one for sure this year. I think we're looking to finally be somewhat out of the shadow of the pandemic, so we can do things more in person. So yeah, I would just basically say stay tuned, and your amazement to those I'm equally amazed. So it's a great group. We've got literally our social media group is 4 or 5 individuals that's their sole focus. They work on that. Yes, it's in a vein of recruiting, but it's definitely in a vein of retention, um, because we've realized how many extended family members of the Decker company are on that. It may not be the driver, but it may be the driver's wife or the driver's husband or their kids, or it's really something that again, I don't have if anything to do with, other than if they tell me to be in it. I show up, but it is something that's really unique, I think, to Decker. So we're proud of that.
Well, what stands out is that it's different people all the time. So it isn't just the same couple of social media people that are making a movie for themselves. You're getting a lot of the team involved, and every one of them is kind of different, and it's got different people involved. It shows the diversity of the company, a bunch of creative ideas. You do things sort of very differently, and you never know what to expect with it. So it really stands out that way as being a good sort of picture of what life is like in the organization, because you've got a group of people that are participating. They're obviously happy. It's not like they are reluctant participants in the thing. So
Right.
it really speaks to the overall culture that's in place there in the company.
Well, and that culture is not, one building with 4 walls, right? Like
Mm.
I've alluded to earlier, we've got a location in Alabama, Indiana, Montana, obviously here in Iowa, we've got a big presence. Um, that's probably our strongest suit, is our diversity. And I will add, that was something that we learned going through this process is, we're doing some things really well, but man, we need to broaden our audience and our horizons so that we can be even better. But I would say, back to those videos, that is something that's neat. Is you might have the Southern group in Alabama do something a little different than the Montana group, but they're all engaged.
Hmm.
And so we're proud of who we are, but we also we look to kind of, hate to sound corny, but we were always looking for new blood and diversification, and how do we attract talent, not just behind the wheel, because this industry is keyed in on that, but we also have to attract talent behind the monitor, the people who are helping run these guys and
Yep,
gals. So yeah.
absolutely. All right. Well, that's all the things that I had on my list. So any final thoughts before we wrap up this episode?
No, I appreciate you having me on. This has been an amazing. I'll speak for the team. We learned so much going through this that we're actually looking forward to doing it again, so that we can see if we're raising, moving the needle,
All right.
for lack of a better term. So yeah, so thank you for having us on, the acknowledgement, and we hope to maybe get on that list again. So.
Okay. Excellent. Well, it's a lot easier the second time. The first time is the painful one, having to answer all those questions the first time, but it gets better from there. So fantastic. I think that's a great place to wrap it up. So thanks, everybody, and check us out next month.